Sunday on the Attorneys, warmer weather means more time on the water.
But boating accidents can be a real risk. Learn what to do just in case.
Call, text, email, then join me along with the experts from the firm of Hollis, Wright & Couch after the news at 10.
Car crash cases, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by Hollis, Wright & Couch, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts. The attorneys with Josh Wright from the Hollis, Wright & Couch Law Firm and host David Lamb.
Hello and welcome into the Attorneys. Appreciate you spending your Sunday evening with us as the weather gets nicer. We're all itching to get outside and enjoy the water, but as you do so, we want to arm you with information. Our topic of conversation tonight is boating accidents and what you need to know before you hit the water. Leading our conversation from the firm of Hollis, Wright & Couch, Josh Wright. Is the boat ready? Are you ready for the water?
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. You know, and we're going to be talking about a topic, as you started the show, that's real relevant right now because people are starting to get to the lake for the weekend. We're not just going to be talking about specific just boating accidents. We'll be talking about some aquatic safety things too. But at the end of the day, you know, this is a pretty relevant topic when spring comes around. There are 20 million boats across the country that are recreational boats that are operated by some people that are experts and some people that aren't.
Not so much.
And so we're going to be talking today a little bit about what you do to protect yourself in circumstances where you're out on the lake. And if you're unlucky enough to be involved in a boating accident and be one of the 8,000 people per year that are across our country, what you should do. And when we talk about these type topics, we brought somebody all the way down from Huntsville who is very knowledgeable in this area, handles these type cases, involved in cases right now. Tom McGrath from Huntsville. Tom, thank you so much for being on to answer some questions that I think are pretty relevant to the time.
Good to be here. Thank you, Josh.
Start out, just tell us a little bit about your practice up in Huntsville, and then we'll kind of work our way into this topic.
I've been in Huntsville for about 20 years. I've spent most of that time in court representing folks who have either been injured, car wrecks, boating accidents, problems with their homes, construction, handled just about every kind of thing you can handle in 20 years.
Well, we're glad to have you on today.
Yeah, relative to boating accidents, let's set the parameters. What constitutes a boating accident? Set the parameters here for us.
It's very similar to the problems with a car, a collision, a serious injury, something that can't be taken care of on the scene with regular first aid. When somebody goes missing or unfortunately maybe suspected of drowning, those are the kinds of things. And the problem is that people think of boating being just a recreational. It's a very serious business. There are very few small accidents in boating.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great point. And you know, one of the biggest issues that we face when we're on the lakes is the experience level of the person operating the motorcraft. Of course, we've got sailboats and rowboats and we've got canoes, but for the most part, most of the accidents, about 50% of all accidents are caused by motorized boats with propellers. And also some personal watercraft, the smaller jet skis and wave runners and whatnot. And the state does a good job of trying to regulate who is capable and competent to operate one of these, and there's some certification requirements we can go into. But the experience level of the individual oftentimes is the cause of a lot of these accidents.
I mean, to drive a vehicle on the road, you know, you have to be 15 to get that permit and 16 to drive. Similar laws or regulations on the waterways in the state?
Yes, since 1994, the state has required anybody who is 14 or anybody below 14 cannot drive a boat or a watercraft, a Sea-Doo, on their own at all. If you're between 12 and 14, you can do so with a safety card that you've gotten from an approved course, as long as you have somebody who's over the age of 18, or excuse me, 19, who has the certification with them. They have to be supervised on the same vessel. Okay. If you're over the age of 14 and you have your own safety certification, you can operate a boat or a Sea-Doo on your own. However, nobody cannot, even if you're 21, 25, you can't operate a boat unless you have the certification.
The certification does require some significant hoops that you've got to go through. You have to learn kind of the rules of the road, if you will. You have to understand them. be able to respond to those in a test format. So it's similar to the certification process we use for somebody who's getting a learning permit to drive a vehicle at 15 and somebody who gets their formal license at 16.
Similarities between driving the vehicle and some having requirements there. What if there is an accident? Is it similar to if you're in an automobile accident?
Actually, there are mandatory reporting requirements in Alabama in case somebody is actually injured that needs medical care, or if there's more than $2,000 worth of damage to the boat. As a lot of people have heard on your show before, it's never a bad idea to have a police report or make a report. You never know what might become a bigger issue later.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And as Tom was mentioning, you've got a duty and responsibility to go to the Marine Police within 10 days under the circumstances that Tom just indicated, which is damage of $2,000 or more, as well as an accident that causes an injury that is greater than just typical first aid. And in those circumstances, you do have a duty to go to the Marine Police and submit a report. But I agree with Tom 100%. One of the keys here is, no different than a car accident, you want to make sure you've got a report down the road for insurance purposes and for purposes of preserving evidence. The same thing is true in the boating world. Right. Getting that Marine report is something you probably should do if you're involved in any form of an incident or accident on the water. It's not real complicated to do that, and it's just a good idea to preserve evidence.
What types of boats are typically involved in accidents on the water?
Typically, it's the smaller boats, the smaller open runabouts, Sea-Doos. Those have the highest incident rate, and they also have the worst injuries. Most of the people who are injured either in a small boat or a Sea-Doo are injured more severely. The drownings that occur in the smaller boats, and more frequently than not, almost 4 out of 5 people who do drown aren't wearing a life jacket.
That's a sad statistic, but it's so true. There are some laws in Alabama related to at what age a child does not have to wear a personal flotation device or some form of life jacket. In the Wright family, I will tell you this, when we are on the lake, my kids wear theirs until they're 12 years old, and of course they complain about it. But it's because of these circumstances, as Tom mentioned, that unfortunately, you're not expecting that you're going to have an accident, but when you do, you want to make sure that that's one thing that is covered, because drownings are caused so often from those people that don't even have the life jackets on.
And let's talk for a second about the injuries that do occur as a result of these accidents. What types of injuries in a boating accident are common?
Unfortunately, speed is usually a factor, and the injuries are more likely to be severe than they are in a common fender bender. Right. Boats and Sea-Doos don't typically have brakes on them, so you're talking about broken bones, you're talking about spinal injuries, you're talking about head injuries, a loss of a lot of blood. A fast spinning propeller can cause some massive damage to the human body very quickly.
In the causes of those the injuries and accidents, some common threads there as well?
The vast majority of injuries come from collisions, also from people not wearing life jackets and propellers. Unfortunately, putting a boat in gear, forward or reverse, is not the same equation for people putting a car in gear, and they forget that when people are in the water or around other boats.
And people don't recognize when you're operating a boat or you're operating a personal watercraft like a jet ski. Once you lose the propeller component, meaning you're in neutral, you can't steer it the way that you can a vehicle and make quick turns and whatnot. So you really do have to give yourself more of a bumper or a buffer, if you will, rather, from other boats on the water. The certification process that people go through, one of the nice things is there are rules of the water, if you will, no different than what we call rules of the road when you're operating a motor vehicle. And you've got to know what those are. Distance that you should maintain from other boats, speeds, and when you can run your boat or your watercraft at certain speeds versus other. How you pass people if you're coming in the same direction. Who yields, who's got the right of way. So there are some certification questions that I do think help people start to make better decisions on the water. But ultimately, carelessness, lack of experience, and alcohol probably are the biggest contributors.
Yeah, time for our first break of the evening. As we head to break, a reminder of how you can participate in our conversation. You can call, text, or email. You can also find the firm of Hollis, Wright & Couch on Facebook. Just search the term Hollis, Wright & Couch, and on Twitter, you'll see it there. It's Hollis_Wright. Stay tuned. More of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis, Wright & Couch, and thank you for watching The Attorneys on Alabama's 13. Now, we hope you, a friend, or a loved one never need legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of this show is simple. Provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Now, your call to the show is free, so if you have questions specific to this show or related to other civil legal matters, call, email, or text us to talk with one of our lawyers. You can also follow us on Facebook or Twitter to learn about important legal news that could affect you or your family. Or simply contact us by going to alabamas13.com and click on the Attorneys link. Now, we know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and for watching The Attorneys here on Alabama's 13.
The nicer weather comes that desire to get out there and enjoy it, but if you're on the water, what do you need to know to protect yourself? We're talking about boating accidents on The Attorneys tonight. You can call, text, email, join the conversation. We love to hear from you. Let's break it down. If I'm involved in a boating accident in Alabama, talk to me about what do I need to do if I'm involved in such an accident?
First thing would be to stay at the scene and make sure that everybody is getting the first aid that they need. Leaving the scene is the same as leaving a car, scene of a car accident. You can't do that.
Okay.
Getting first aid, usually, like I said, there are hopefully our first aid kits on boats and things like that. And then exchanging information, addresses, perhaps exchanging licenses, things like that to get the information, and insurance information if it's available.
You know, one of the things that I just think is kind of a common sense recommendation, know where your fire extinguisher is on a boat. That's an issue that may not even relate to an accident, where fire can be caused on a boat, engine overheating, and then in accidents, making sure you know where that fire extinguisher is and how to use it can be helpful to protect you, your friends, family, etc. So that's something to consider too.
What about, and you touched on it earlier, in the causes of the accidents, oftentimes alcohol use does contribute. And quite often on the lake, you'll see somebody enjoying an adult beverage as they cruise up and down the waterway. What sort of regulations or laws pertaining to alcohol use if you are the operator of a boat?
That's a great question.
Actually, the very same laws that apply to the operation of a motor vehicle on a road apply to a boat. There are prohibitions against anybody below the age of legal drinking from drinking anything or having anything in their system at all. For adults, it's the exact same 0.08, which is usually one beverage or less for an adult per hour. And so the penalties are exactly the same. The problem that usually comes from people don't realize their limitations on a boat. Even an avid boater like Josh or myself may be on the water 30 days a year, right, and the operation of a boat is different than a car. We're in a car every day and we've got a sense of familiarity with it. Things on the water happen unexpectedly, and it's not as simple as going out there and doing what you did the day before.
You know, in the environment, to answer, or hit on your issue that you raised, the environment itself is conducive to alcohol consumption if you think about it. People are relaxing, they're vacationing on the lake. The weather is nice. Oftentimes it's hot weather, which contributes to somebody consuming more beverage, and can get people dehydrated quicker. So the ability to consume alcohol on the lake is easier. It's a more conducive environment oftentimes, so people do it more often. And it can exacerbate the normal conditions that you would have because of the weather that you're under. So we do see that not just carelessness and being inexperienced causing a lot of accidents, we see oftentimes alcohol and significant alcohol consumption contributing to a lot of these accidents. I don't have a statistic in front of me, but Tom and I had talked in preparation of the show. I know there are some statistics out there that will show you that a vast majority of these accidents are probably caused, at least as to motorized boats, are caused related to alcohol consumption.
Yeah. A question we've got here, and we love getting your questions, call, text, emails. Go ahead and do that throughout the program. But a question here, can the driver of a boat who acts in an irresponsible, unsafe manner be held liable for causing the accident?
Absolutely. It works very much the same as the rules of the road for a car. You have absolute obligations under your license from the state to operate a boat, to wear a kill switch, to have life jackets on, to stay on your side of the channel, to not use excessive speed in areas, and if you do cause a collision or you do cause an injury for violating one of these rules, you're absolutely liable, just as you would be on a car or on a road.
You know, and we talked about the rules of the water, similar to the rules of the road. One of the things to note there is those establish duties and standards by which somebody who is responsibly boating needs to follow. And a violation of those rules of the water, not keeping a sufficient buffer between you and another boat, using excessive speed, not passing consistently with what the rules require, not yielding appropriately. All those things weigh into the evaluation that attorneys use for these type cases. And you know, we talked about Tom and his expertise here in litigating these type cases. One of the things that's important for him is to determine what are those rules that are applicable, what standards were applicable, and did the person that was operating the watercraft that caused the accident, did they follow those standards or not? Another thing people don't recognize is these cases oftentimes, the lawyers that are handling them, they'll take them on contingency, which means if a person's been involved in one of these accidents, they should not fear that they're going to have to pay a lawyer in order to have their case evaluated. Guys like Tom and our firm will evaluate these cases for people at no cost to them to determine whether or not they have a cause of action. So it's always a wise thing, I think, to get with a firm that understands these types of claims, that can evaluate them for you, and they can do it at no cost to you.
Okay. Another question we've got, what is the statute of limitations for boating accidents?
As a general rule, especially since you're on the water, and a good portion of the evidence, if you will, is gone a few moments after a collision. There's no skid marks or anything like that. The sooner you begin an investigation with a good law firm, the better. Statute of limitations for adults, statute of limitations for children under the age of 19 are different. Depending on where you are, state law or federal law may apply. The short answer is don't wait. The longer you wait, the witnesses, the evidence, damage to boats, things like that needs to be preserved, photographed, so you can tell what happened and actually prove it if necessary.
And this area of the law can be complicated, as Tom alluded to. There's some federal statutes that are applicable in certain circumstances, in certain areas where you're operating boats, that could be applicable, that could step the statute period up.
Right. Another question, is there any other basis for a personal injury in a boating accident besides negligence?
Oh, absolutely. Alcohol. That opens people up to more than negligence, because it's just like a car. We know that 3 or 4 times the risk of injuring somebody happens when somebody's drinking and driving in a car, and that is probably as high or actually higher in a boat. Intentional conduct, reckless conduct can open people up to punitive damages of all kinds.
You know, and the cases have to be evaluated too for the time frame. Somebody who's doing 30 miles an hour in a boat at night with no light versus somebody doing it in broad daylight, that's a totally different circumstance. And so that component has to be evaluated too, and guys like Tom evaluate that to determine if somebody falls in from basic carelessness and negligence to wanton conduct or intentional conduct.
Right. All right, time for us to take a quick break, but as we do so, a reminder of how you can get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. Another segment remaining, so you got time to call, text, email. Stay tuned. More of The Attorneys coming right up.
I'm Josh Firth with the law firm of Hollis, Wright & Couch. Most of us have either been involved in or know someone who has had an automobile accident. Sometimes police will issue a ticket if one party is at fault in the crash, but what about those times when a ticket is not given? In tonight's Legal 411, we're answering the question, who's responsible when no ticket is issued? Just because a ticket isn't given doesn't mean there isn't liability, especially if someone is injured in the crash. First, it's important to understand the law. Did you know that unless an officer personally sees the crash, he can't write a ticket, even if he is certain the other person is at fault? There are 2 exceptions to this rule. 1, if someone is driving under the influence, and 2, if someone does not have proof of insurance for their vehicle. Even if a ticket is issued, there's no guarantee of liability or that the injured party will win the case in front of a jury. However, a jury may find a person liable for negligence if the person at fault was driving improperly or violated one of these 6 rules of the road. For example, driving without proper taillights, texting or talking on the phone, improper lights or signals on a trailer, failure to yield to oncoming traffic, hitting another car from behind, or changing lanes improperly without signaling. Any of these can serve as a basis for a jury to find someone negligent for causing an accident and injuring another person or their property. So the person who caused the accident is ultimately responsible for the injuries, even if the police officer does not assign fault. But you still have to prove it. That's why it's so important to ask for legal guidance if you're ever injured in a crash. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis, Wright & Couch want to help answer your questions on real issues you face every day. And remember, a trained and competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you. Thank you for watching The Attorneys on Alabama's 13.
Careful when you're out there on the waterways. Welcome back in to the attorneys, our final segment here. Let's get right to it. Are there any safety measures that I can take to prevent an accident?
Good question.
Absolutely. Know the rules. Be prepared when you go out. Wear your life jacket. Wear a kill switch. Can't tell you the benefits of wearing a kill switch. You got to be there holding the steering wheel anyway. Right. Put your kill switch on. Knowing the rules, being familiar with the Marine Police, as much as people tend to avoid the Marine Police, they're there for your safety. Right. They really are. They're there to do nothing but enhance everybody's safety and the day on the water being a good experience instead of being a tragedy.
Yeah, and do your best not to get into boats with people that have consumed too much alcohol. That's another thing. You know, Tom has mentioned the kill switch a couple times. People may not know this. There's a lanyard or in boats manufactured after a certain date. There's a line that is connected to the throttle that you just clip on to any part, your bathing suit, whatever. And since you are there already, if you are thrown out of the boat, it will kill the engine so that the engine will not continue to propel as people are outside the boat with nobody manning the boat. So it is a very smart thing.
Yeah. A question here, what sort of damages can be recovered from a boating accident?
In that respect, it's fairly similar to the traditional types of damages you see for either car wrecks or on the job injuries, medical expenses, lost wages, rehabilitation expenses, if you're in a wheelchair, custodial care, pain and suffering damages, and even punitive damages if the situation warrants it.
Yeah. A lot of times, you know, as Tom mentioned early in the show, in the first segment before the first commercial break, you know, unfortunately, these accidents often result in significant permanent injury. And so getting with a firm that has the experts necessary to be able to make sure that the permanency of your injury is locked down, and then to have the experts necessary to help explain in a case what impact that permanent injury is going to have on a person's life, their income level, their lack of ability to be employed, those types of things. Those are all important things. You want to go to the right firm that are handling these cases if you unfortunately have personally or had a friend or family member been involved in something that it resulted in a permanent injury.
Right. Another question here, this is about informing the authorities if I'm in a boating accident. Is it a good idea to inform the police?
It's actually required. It's a state law. Within 10 days, if you have a minimum amount of damage, anything over $2,000, if somebody disappears, if you can't find somebody, especially on a body of water like the Tennessee River or in Huntsville, it's moving, and it's moving rapidly. The sooner the authorities find out about it, the better. When you do contact them, have your registration, have your insurance information, the name of the other boat owner, operator, their information. Again, those people are there for your safety.
One of the things also that we mentioned early on in the show was related to exchanging of information if you have an accident. Tom just mentioned a great idea, which is to make sure that you have got your registration information, make sure you've got any other ownership information you have, and your insurance information with you in the boat in a safe area, maybe in a Ziploc bag in case it gets wet. That's always there in case something ever happens. I think that's just good advice for anybody to make sure that they're able to exchange the appropriate information.
And let's be clear, if a scenario, we're on the waterway this weekend involved in an accident, walk us through what those next steps should be and the necessary required steps to take.
First of all, make sure everybody's okay. First aid sounds like a catchphrase, but blood, infection, disability, especially with younger children, that is as necessary and fast as possible. It takes longer to get medical help on the water, right. More than basic first aid. After that, getting a hold of a Alabama State Trooper who's on the water, that can be difficult. A lot of places don't have good cell coverage. Getting in touch with 911, make sure the authorities are on their way after everybody's accounted for and being treated. And then making sure that you have witnesses, making sure that you have the evidence that you need. If it's physical evidence that maybe things broke off in the water, perhaps somebody took off, maybe somebody didn't see what happened after their skier or their wake, things like that, finding who the people are and getting them back to the scene, things like that.
Okay.
Locking your location down. That's not as easy as it is in a car accident. Yeah. Locking your location down based on evaluating where you are on the lake is also important.
Yeah. Time for our final thought, Tom?
Being on a boat is a very liberating feeling. We have the sun and the wind and everything else. The problem is that we have to be twice as aware for something we don't do as often. What is happening in front of you, the fact that the speed and the gap between you is going to close faster and you're not going to have any breaks. Be more aware. Take the time to prepare your boat yourself. Maybe not go out the very first day with a boatload full of people for an active day. Put the boat in the water, take a test drive, perhaps review the rules, things like that. I've seen the tragedy, I've seen the permanent problems, the devastation that can come to a family from this, and a little bit of prevention. If everybody follows the rules, it shouldn't be an accident.
I'd end just with know your experience level if you're operating a boat, and make sure you're operating the boat within your experience level. And don't forget that if there is, we want people to have a great summer and to have a good experience on the lake. But if something should go wrong, if somebody is involved in an accident, get with counsel early so that evidence can be preserved, information can be handled appropriately, working with the Marine Police can be handled. Remember that lawyers take these cases on contingency, which means that you don't have to pay anything to have the case evaluated. And I think it's always a wise decision if you're involved in this type of accident to just get with counsel and at least understand what your rights are.
Right. All right, good advice. Timely for sure. Appreciate you both being with us and appreciate you being with us as well. As we wrap up for the night, a reminder of how you can still get in touch with the attorneys at the firm of Hollis, Wright & Couch. Call, text, email, find them on Facebook if you search the term, the firm term, and also on Twitter as well. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next week on The Attorney.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright & Couch.